to the Garbage Time Podcast. I'm your host, Katie Nolan. Playoff hockey is here, which is very exciting for me, and it should be really exciting for you too. It is the best postseason in sports, so you should be watching it. To get you hyped up, my guest in today's guest-only podcast is Puck Daddy's Greg Wyshynski. We covered a bunch of hockey topics, including Greg's involvement in the John Scott All-Star Game story, which I'm sure you heard, his feelings on Gary Bettman, which may surprise you, and his predictions for the Stanley Cup Playoffs. So take a listen. Greg Wyshynski, welcome to the Garbage Time Podcast.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, you said that so genuinely.
I'm excited to be here. You did our new podcast, Puck Soup on Nerdist,
Puck Soup
which is
on
going to
Nerdist.
drop soon.
Yeah.
And you did the podcast in what I would say was a spacious utility closet.
Yep.
And so being here is nice. This is about the size of someone's sitting room in a city condo, I would say.
You think in a city condo? I'd say this is the size of the entire condo of a city condo.
Yeah, it might be. But it's nice. You have nice upholstery. This looks like it came from...
IKEA.
Okay, yeah.
It's a sectional that we didn't buy an end for. So they're just the middle seats of a sectional sofa.
On three, let's say the name of the couch. Ready? 1, 2, 3. The Flurgan.
Corvon. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
we both work.
Oh, we were
I have
wrong.
no idea
Yeah.
what it was actually
Sorry.
called.
But it probably has some lingonberry juice stains on it somewhere.
Sure does. See, there's his first obscure reference. Write them down. We're going to keep track. So you, for those who don't know, because hockey not as popular in the United States as it should be, you run Puck Daddy through Yahoo, correct?
That's correct.
Still through Yahoo.
Yes.
That you launched that in 2008.
That is correct.
What were you doing before that? How did you get to?
My first gig was writing high school sports and college sports for a chain of newspapers in Washington, D.C. called The Connection. There's like 23 of them. And I was the executive sports editor,
Whoa.
trudging out for Friday night field hockey matchups between secondary schools.
Fun.
And then the hockey thing was sort of a side career. I worked for a couple magazines. As we went further and further, I worked for AOL's Fan House, which just recently got the oral history treatment from a site, which means that it's old and obscure.
And nobody even remembers
No one cares about it. And then I wrote for Deadspin for about a year under Will Leach, doing
Great guy.
hockey. Great guy. And also the place I'd say honed me best as a writer, because it was the first time I had ever written somewhere where I was convinced that the people reading the posts and commenting on them were exponentially funnier and more insightful than I was.
Yeah.
So it made you up your game. So
Right.
I learned a lot writing for Deadspin, and then they started Puck Daddy in 2008 on Yahoo. The original name of the site was the NHL Experts blog, which
Cool.
was a name that I really miss for
Yeah.
being as hubristic as it is.
It sounds very much like you knew what you were talking about.
Oh yeah. And then we settled on Puck Daddy, and we've been killing it for 8 years.
Now you just sound like a guy who likes to watch hockey and probably is a little creepy.
Yeah, kind of guy who probably waxes his car and likes to sit down with a Miller Lite of some sort while they watch the game.
Does Miller Lite come in various kinds, or
Well, maybe Miller
light
comes in various
beer?
kinds.
Yeah, light beer of some
Miller
sort.
High Life, the champagne of beers, Chili Millies as they're known.
Puck Daddy is basically like for me at least, it's like the blog for hockey. It's
Yeah,
like
that's
the authority.
how it is for me too.
On well, yes, I don't. So.
Yes.
When did you realize that was like you were becoming the big?
I would say honestly, it was when I started to see our voice imitated in other places, and when I saw our stories appearing in other places that didn't necessarily say they found it on our site. I'm like, oh, that means that people are reading us and finding these things, and then they're blogging them themselves, and they don't give us credit. But that's okay, because it just means that people are seeing it first where we are. But as time has gone on, the times in which I've been blown away by the influence of the blog are obviously like things that happened this year, where we were at the forefront of getting John Scott elected to the All-Star game.
We will get to that.
Yeah, and when I did tequila shots with the NHL referee,
Also
and
going to
he
get to that.
got suspended. Like, there are times when I'm genuinely surprised by how influential we are, and pleasantly surprised by how many people still read us after 8 years of making the same jokes.
They are the same.
Yeah, pretty much the same.
Do you think it's because the hockey community is so much smaller than, say, the football community or baseball?
Well, it's funny. It is smaller, but I would say that as a digital writer, like, it's also extraordinarily engaged. which I think helps. That when we're looking for readership to come find our site or hoping to build a community around the site, which is what's happened as well, and is one of the reasons why I think the site still works, it's because hockey fans don't have a lot of other places to go when it comes to media, especially in the U.S., and we've really positioned ourselves as being like a U.S. kind of American-centric, flag-waving, apple pie-eating, F you Canada kind of blog. I think people really gravitated towards that, and we found an audience that was being underserved, that would watch their nightly news every night, and they would see 3 minutes on baseball, 2 minutes on off-season football, and then and by the way, the Rangers won.
Yeah.
And now for traffic, it's like, what are you gonna do? So I think people were searching for a place that they could get that kind of news, talk about hockey, hear some insight. And then we pulled it off, along with some giggles here and there.
Some giggles. Why do you think hockey has struggled to gain popularity here?
Well, it's an alien sport to a lot of people that didn't play it.
Right.
So I think that's always the toughest thing, is that when everybody played some semblance of baseball growing up. Everybody threw a basketball in a hoop growing up. Everybody's thrown a football at some point in their lives, but not everybody's picked up a hockey stick. And I think there's always sort of that barrier to get through of what is this game and how does it work and what do I need to know to get into it. I think it's struggled to translate to television. Like the old harangue about hockey is that if you go to the arena and watch the game, you're hooked.
It's so
there's
good.
nothing like
it's
it,
the
right?
best live sport.
And they've gotten better over the years through, especially when HD came in, making the game look like it does in the arena and sound like it does a little bit, but it does lack that electricity that you get at the live event.
Unless the puck is aglow.
Oh, well, they tried that too.
That's quite electric.
Yeah, it's very. Well, it wasn't so much the glowing; it was the comet tail they gave it that I really enjoyed, because really
they being Fox.
Well, in fairness, but here's the wonderful thing, right? Like, through great accidents comes opportunity. Did you know that the same technology that they used to put a comet tail on the puck and make it look like an Italian plumber who should run out and start stomping on mushrooms during the game, that same technology was what they used for NASCAR to do that awesome thing where they put the driver's face here, and then they have the big long arrow that goes to the car. And I think it's the same technology they used on the first down line as well.
I did not know that.
So yeah, glow puck was god awful, but
we learned from it.
We learned from it. Yeah, and then the other thing too that stands in the way of hockey, and this is the toughest one, is the gatekeepers that are in charge of the news of places like some unnamed competitors of Fox Sports 1 and newspapers and places like that. Because the bottom line is that, like, if you have hosts on the air that have their own properties and their own shows, and they don't know nothing about hockey, they're not talking about it. And when they do, it's going to come off as completely not genuine, and no one's tuning in for hockey anyway.
Right.
And then if you have news editors at newspapers and nightly news places and sports highlight shows that don't like...
Sports Center.
Yeah, Sports Center, for example. If they don't like hockey,
right,
or don't understand hockey, or don't know that there's an audience for it,
right,
then they won't put it on the air. And it's become sort of a really circular problem.
Yeah, because part of that is reflected by the fact that if let's say my network doesn't have the rights to hockey, then me talking about hockey doesn't help my network.
Right.
My network would rather I focus on the sports that they do have the rights to, so that there can be sort of a build of a type of fan base.
Yeah.
And not for nothing, we've done things in the past where I wanted to use hockey footage, and the NHL charges so much for the rights to their footage that it's not worth it for a low-budget show like my own to talk about hockey, and it's difficult to talk about a sport that isn't as mainstream like hockey without being able to show what it is you're talking about.
Which is crazy, because they've also been very liberal with their rules as far as fans using footage to create YouTube videos and GIFs and everything else. So that's kind of interesting that you said that.
Yeah.
The other issue too is that it's become a circular problem, which is that when ESPN, since we can speak about them freely apparently, when ESPN, we can't talk about Google on our site. I don't know how you get away with the ESPN thing.
I haven't asked. I just assume. It's the Bill Simmons method.
Hockey fans don't watch ESPN. They've got no reason to. They don't cater to us.
Yeah.
So we just stopped watching. We go online, we look at blogs, we talk amongst ourselves on Twitter.
Yeah.
So when ESPN then goes, well, we don't want to put hockey on the air because nobody in our audience likes hockey, well, why do you think that is? Because you've chased them all away.
Yeah.
Which is why the World Cup of Hockey coming back this fall, is so interesting, because ESPN bid for it and won the bid from the NBC. So it's going to be the first ESPN hockey joint that we've had since the league left after the 2005 lockout. And I'm really interested. The NHL's take is, oh, money, great, which is always their take. But also, maybe if we put this thing on ESPN, we can get our stuff on the shouty shows. The shouty people will start talking about hockey too and shouting about the World Cup. So we'll see if that happens. I doubt it.
Highly doubt it.
I highly
The
doubt it
shouty
too.
people.
I highly doubt it.
Well, what do you love about hockey? Because I get asked these questions so much, and I feel like no one ever asks the actually genuine people who work in hockey. What do you love about hockey? Why do you think people should love hockey?
It is fast and kinetic. It's unpredictable. There are flashpoints of brutality. Not as many as there used to be, but there still are. I love the international sort of mixing pot of players that come in. I like the fact that my league is the biggest deal to a hockey fan in like Finland. And they've got their own league, but it's like how we view European soccer. It's like our guys go over there and it's like, oh man, you're on the pinnacle now. And then like their guys come over here and they're like, oh, you're playing for the Stanley Cup. That's huge. And I think there's a really beautiful global communal thing going on there. But the sport itself is just the best. It's just like, you know, there's a sort of next door neighbor vibe to the players. They're very blue collar, very down to earth. The live game itself is unparalleled, and the playoffs themselves are, for me, the single most exciting 2 months of any sports season.
Hands down.
Just the fact that there's 7-game series, and the fact that you have so much history, and the fact that these guys have now gone through an 82-game grind, and their bodies are hurting, and their bones are breaking and stuff.
And they're 50 years old,
they're 50
Jaromir
years old.
Jagr.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's nothing like it. Why I love hockey is a tough question though, like, because honestly, and you know, the folks at Puck Daddy understand this. Like, the game that I loved is not necessarily the game we have now. It's not to say that we have now is worse. It's just different. Like, I became a hockey fan because I grew up in New Jersey, and my dad would pay the least amount of money possible for tickets, and I would trudge roughly 700 steps up to the upper deck of the Meadowlands Arena and watch the Devils play the Flyers, and there would be fights on the ice and fights in the stands, and it was brutal. And every time, when growing to school in Jersey, like every time the Devils would play the Rangers, it was life or death. It was, you are either going to go to school the next day and feel amazing and stand on the bodies of your fallen enemies, or you're going to hide in your locker all day because the Ranger fans are going to give you hell because the Devils lost. And maybe those stakes change when you get older. I don't know. But I also think they change when you have a sport that now, based on what we've seen this season, fighting is going to be at its lowest levels, maybe in NHL history. Like, to the point where I think at least for the first time in the last 16 years, the fights per game is under 0.30 fights per game.
Yeah, refs they're intervening much quicker than they used to.
Yeah, and that's also a commitment to player safety. Like, when the league is getting sued by a bunch of former players about concussions, the last thing they're going to do is try to encourage fighting to happen. So it's a much faster, safer, less blood on the ice kind of game than it used to be.
How do you feel about that?
I don't like it. I mean, but that's just personal bias. Like, the game I loved was that game. I know why that game can't exist now, but it bothers me that, you know, the NHL tries to push this notion of rivalry. Like, they've got Rivalry Night on NBC, which is
the dumbest game.
It's the dumbest games. Yeah, like we talked about that. Like the Sabres and Wild. What Rivalry
Oh,
Night?
it's so intense. Yeah. They've hated each other for 3 weeks.
Buffalo is a place where it's cold. Is it colder in Minnesota? You know, it's like they try to admit it doesn't work. And like, I know what rivalry looks like.
Yeah.
I know rivalry is these guys beating themselves senseless, and line brawls and hatred, and that doesn't necessarily exist outside of maybe a few true rivalries, Penguins Flyers being one of them. That doesn't exist anymore.
Why would you say, because, you know, one of the things I encounter when I talk to non-hockey fans, the thing they find the most off-putting, the thing they take away from the sport is the fighting, and it's so violent.
Yeah.
Why would you say, how would you explain to a non-hockey fan what fighting in hockey means and why we like it so much?
Well, the first news is some good news. There's no fighting anymore.
I know. Yeah. If that's like the number one turnoff that people have, and I'm like, really though, it's not that bad anymore. I find myself saying more than ever at games, like, let them go.
Yeah.
But they just don't do it anymore. They don't wait for the gloves to drop. There's no ripping off of the helmet. You just have to. They just intervene right away.
It's like, I don't want to go to France. Everybody everybody stinks. No,
Yeah.
actually, they've discovered Old Spice deodorant. It's really nice over there now.
And Axe body spray.
And Axe body spray. Lots of Axe body spray.
Which is worse.
Well, the fighting. Okay, I'm still an advocate for fighting, but I'm very much honest about why, which is that I find it entertaining. I would be the person rooting for the lion to eat the Christian in Roman times. I make no bones about that. I'm entertained by it. I know why it can't exist because of lawsuits and CTE and concussions, and now you have generations of players that have come through hockey that haven't had to fight to get there. And it used to be for a lot of guys of minimal talent, well, you have to go start punching people in order to even make the league. And that's not the case anymore because those jobs don't exist because it's too fast for a knuckle dragger to be on the fourth line playing 4 minutes a night just so he can punch someone else.
Right.
Because there's no one else left to punch because they're all out of the league too. But when we do have fights, if you're turned off by hockey fighting, I would say the thing you have to understand is that they happen usually for a reason. It's either because two people don't like each other. It's either because two people turn to each other and say, hey, the crowd's dead, let's put on a show. It could happen to try to change the momentum in a game. It could be very tactical in that sense. It could be to exact revenge.
Right.
I don't buy into the notion of it being something that deters other violent acts. I think it's a very sort of 1980s, let's get two big beefy guys to protect Wayne Gretzky kind of thing. I don't think that's the case anymore, but there are definitely reasons why fights happen and when they happen, and they're tactical. But if you hate it, that's fine. I understand it too. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, it's illegal to fight in the National Hockey League. You get 5 minutes off the ice for punching someone else in the face.
But it's worth it for us.
Completely.
I always just like that it's self-regulating. You know, it's the sense of community that, like, yeah, the refs are here and they're gonna. I loved when the refs would let them go at it.
Yeah.
It's like, we're gonna put you in the box, but go ahead, fight, because it was like you had a cheap shot on my teammate, and I'm now going to, because of that, kick your fucking ass.
Exactly.
And that was the beautiful thing about it.
It was beautiful, and it remains beautiful. Fighting still happens. It doesn't happen as often. When it does happen, I think that it gets an even bigger spotlight now than it used to because it's so rare. But I miss it. Like I said, it lent itself to a certain intensity in this game that I think is generally missing. But at the same time, like, again, I grew up in the 90s, right? And I know that game, and I have a hard time sometimes talking about the fighting thing with fans that were born in the 90s and grew up with the 2000s game because they don't see it. Like if you were born in 91, let's say.
Well, first of all, fuck you. Second of all.
And all you know is post 2005 lockout NHL, you're gonna be like, what's a fight? And why is it important? And then, I come over and I'm like, well, let me spin you a tale about. And then they're
the only fight they see is the big, the huge, the goalie brawl,
right,
or the bad.
Right. And then
stuff.
I'm like, there was a guy named Bob Probert, and he's like, oh, what's he doing now? I'm like, he's dead. Oh, there's a guy named he's dead too. And you're just like, at some point, you feel like an old school wrestling fan being like, oh yeah,
back in my day.
Yeah, back in my day when everybody didn't die in their 40s. So I understand why it doesn't happen anymore. I understand, all the arguments against it, but people are lying to them. First of all, people are lying to themselves if they're one of these people that says, I don't like hockey fighting. When hockey fighting happens, I just turn the channel. No, you don't. That's a complete lie.
Yeah.
And then the other lie is obviously that the game today is as intense as it's ever been, and that's just not true. I mean, anyone who followed the game in the 80s and 90s and 70s knows that that's not true.
Do you think they'll ever completely eradicate fighting from hockey?
I don't think they need to. I think generationally, and I've always said this about it, that's why I was hoping there would never be a draconian, you get suspended 10 games for it thing, is that it's just going to leave the game organically. The game is super fast. The players are smaller.
Yeah.
It's much more of a league in which the skill guys are the guys who end up getting roster spots.
There's no room for a bruiser anymore.
There's not.
And
again, I remember there was a situation where the Toronto Maple Leafs sent down their brawler, Colton Orr, one year. They sent him to the minor leagues, and they're like, why would you do that? He's a fan favorite. He does a role on the team. And their general manager's just like, he literally has no one left to fight. What is he going to do? Just start a fight with some guy who doesn't fight?
Yeah.
Because then he'll be suspended for 25 games
Exactly.
for attacking some poor guy. So it's definitely not anything I don't think that they have to enact legislation to get rid of. It'll happen organically. Unless, of course, and this is always the thing with the NHL, some catastrophe happens and then they have to get rid of it for, causing a death or something.
Yeah, that's always the case with any league, right?
Yeah.
Speaking of enforcers / fan favorites, let's talk about the John Scott All-Star game situation. Give a quick rundown for anybody who may not be familiar about what happened there, what transpired. Because you were like kind of, I don't want to give you too much credit, but you were kind of behind the whole push.
Yeah, I mean, it wound up being that way.
Yeah, so give them the rundown. So
the rundown is that myself and Jeff Merrick on our podcast, Merrick vs. Wyshynski, we...
Nice plug,
Thank you, I try. It's available on Yahoo's Puck Daddy blog. We were talking about the new All-Star Game format. It was 3-on-3, and we were saying to ourselves, okay, this is now the 4th or 5th incarnation of the All-Star Game. The game the previous year was a disaster. I mean, one of the single worst hockey games anyone's ever seen,
so
even
boring.
as an exhibition game.
Yeah.
How do we spice things up? How do we make it more interesting? And we're like, who can we put in an All-Star Game to skate 3-on-3 that might be a show?
Because there's a fan vote.
There's a fan vote, right. So like who would be really funny to see play 3-on-3? And we're cycling through names in our mind, and then we were like, oh, John Scott. And John Scott was a guy who bounced around the league a little bit, was without question a heavyweight champ as far as enforcers go, without question was a player of, shall we call it, limited offensive skill.
Basically, he's a guy that you signed to be muscle, but he was not very good at actual hockey.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And also a guy, and this is the very important part of the story in my eyes, because there was a lot of people who criticized us for saying, you're just trying to make a mockery of this man. You're trying to shame him out of the league. I'm like, not really. He is a goofball. He was a guy who scored one of the few goals he ever scored in his career, and then wore a T-shirt showing his goal celebration of that goal, and like put it on social media. And like when his name came up, we both were like, "Oh, that's the guy." Was it an idea that was going to mess with the NHL? Yeah, probably. I mean, we were trying to rain on their parade a little bit, I think.
NHL fans love nothing more than to fuck with the NHL.
Right.
Because the NHL has fucked with us over the years.
Yeah, and also they opened themselves up for it by allowing things like fan votes. So, and this was not the first fan vote that was hijacked, we should also say, too. It's the first one that was oddly successful outside of when the Latvians got Zemgus Girgensons in the All-Star game the previous year. It just resonated for some reason. It caught the attention of hockey fans who, especially on Reddit, that voted him higher and higher and higher. Then once he reached the top of the fan vote, then the floodgates opened. And so now we've got this guy who's primarily a fighter that's going to be maybe in the All-Star game. People are getting behind it. And then things get real crazy. And you know, when we started it, we were always like, we knew it was going to be a good idea. Dude was going to play in the All-Star game. Bar was going to be low. He would do something of hockey skill. People would go crazy for it. It'd be a nice, quaint story and a nice sidebar to the event.
An exhibition game.
An exhibition
game.
It
doesn't matter.
What we didn't anticipate was the fact that his team, the Arizona Coyotes, would trade him to a minor league team in Newfoundland because he wouldn't step down from the All-Star game after he was selected, basically.
The team asked him and the league asked him. They said, listen, we know you got voted in.
Yeah,
we would really rather you not because this is going to make a joke of us, so step down.
Team asked him because they wanted their own guys in, and he was just not a player of import to them.
Right.
So he refused, and according to Scott, he was traded because of it. And then to the minor leagues, no less.
Which is huge financial implications for him as a person. He was expecting children at the time.
Yeah, that was the other thing, too, is that he was traded at a time where his wife was pregnant with twins, which everybody like freaked out about. And then also the idea was he was traded to Montreal, demoted, and that if he was in the minor leagues, he wouldn't get to go to the All-Star game.
Right.
The NHL asked him to step down, maybe before that, I think, and then did the infamous, what will your kids think if you play in the All-Star game thing, and then he just flipped his lid. And then Scott wrote on the Players Tribune this story kind of chronicling the whole thing. And now we've got this like operatic battle between like the underdog and the corporate bastards trying to keep him down. That we didn't anticipate. And him going to the All-Star game and you know, putting on a cool move in the shootout and the skills competition, scoring 2 goals in the All-Star game.
So wait, so you gotta fix the situation. So they traded him, demoted him.
Oh, yeah.
How did he still end up playing in the game?
He ended up playing the outcry of the fans.
Because the NHL made a smart move.
Well, the NHL made a smart move that they were bullied into making,
Yeah, exactly.
though. Because the move they wanted to make was, you go down there and you stay there and you don't bother our All-Star game.
Keep quiet.
What they realized, though, pretty quickly was that, you know, as much as they're going to be like, but what about the 3-on-3? Everybody was going to be like, but what about the guy who won the popular vote? You didn't let him play. And so I think it became pretty apparent that no matter what they did, he was going to be the story of the weekend.
You can't protect the sanctity of a 3-on-3 All-Star game. There is no sanctity.
Well,
let him play.
A lot of people in the media got haughty about it too.
Yeah.
They're just like, these stupid basement bloggers, and like Jeremy
Roenick
Roenick called us out and stuff, so it's so important for guys to play the All-Star game. I'm like, it probably was when you were playing JR, because
now it
you were
matter.
playing with Mario and Gretzky, and now you can't even get Sidney Crosby to play in an All-Star game. So don't talk to me about the All-Star game being this tremendous honor.
Yeah, exactly.
So anyway, Scott goes to the All-Star game, becomes a sensation, totally great dude, charms the pants off the media, takes a picture of the media as they're speaking to him on media day so he can remember the moment. And then as everybody knows, scores 2 goals in the All-Star game itself.
Scores 2 goals!
Yeah.
He has scored how many goals in his whole career?
Single digits.
Yeah. 2 goals in the All-Star game.
And then again, the NHL has to deserve credit for not understanding what they had here and then becoming the ultimate villain, like the Vince McMahon to his Stone Cold. Like, it was the perfect thing, because in the last ditch effort of stupidity, they listed 3 All-Star MVP candidates for the game, and John Scott's name wasn't one of them. So at the end of this game, at the end of this glorious 3-on-3 tournament the NHL's put on, it's a fun All-Star game. Everybody's feeling it. John Scott
People
scored
are
goals.
watching it.
And people the ratings went up 32%.
32%.
There's booing. There's booing in the Nashville arena because John Scott's name is not one of the names on the MVP list. And to Gary Bettman's credit, from what I've been told,
it hurts to say that sentence.
We'll get to Bettman in a second. And to Gary Bettman's credit, he's the one who ran over and said, "What'd you guys do? Like, how'd you not make him one of the MVPs?" And so that he helped get him be the MVP, wins the car, goes on the shoulders of his teammates, and now Mitch Albom's writing a movie about him. So that's the end result, is the joke candidate that we put up that we always knew would be a great story for the All-Star game, and the ratings went up and everybody loved it, and now there's a movie about him. So
things worked out. Oh, brushing the dirt off your shoulder.
The Bettman thing is important because I know a lot of sports fans have opinions about their commissioners.
How do you feel about
And a
Bettman?
lot of hockey fans hate Gary Bettman. And I, in full disclosure, when I first started writing on the internet, on news groups, a long time ago, the column I wrote, the signature on the column would be something, 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 and why Gary Bettman is a jackass. Because in the 90s, I hated the man. I thought the man was ruining my sport. I thought the sport was unwatchable because of all the defense. I thought he was mismarketing the game. He's trying to promote offense and scoring at a time when there was none. And some of that still is valid. But as time has progressed, I think I'm like maybe like 60-40 okay with Bettman.
You're softening.
I am, because I appreciate what he's responsible for and what he's not. He's not responsible for the rules in the game. That's the GMs and the competition committee, and Bettman is just kind of there and being like, all right, I'm putting guys in place to make these decisions, but ultimately it's their decisions. It's guys that are in the game making those calls, not Gary Bettman sitting on a throne being like, get rid of the red line. It's the opposite of the Bettman impression I usually do, by the way, which is much more
What's the Bettman impression you usually do?
stereotypical. Get rid of the red line. So I don't blame him for that. I do blame him for labor Armageddon, which has succeeded in killing the momentum of hockey.
Every time we start to gain some.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I blame him for that. But I think overall, like, it's hard to argue with the television contracts they've been able to get, the fact that he put people in place that helped create outdoor hockey games and other shit. Like, I think he deserves more credit from hockey fans than he gets. But at the same time, I think that the league has had some deep flaws during his stewardship of it.
Just like no other sport would have as many lockouts as the NHL.
Yeah, but that's because the financial system they have is jacked, and because other sports have, a Scrooge McDuck money bin of revenue versus the NHL, which is scratching and clawing for every penny they can get.
Yeah.
And so when you're dealing with a much smaller pie, you're going to go to war over that pie more often than other leagues are.
That's true.
So that's part of the issue.
I think that's why Bettman's so hated, though. Like, Goodell will take away, my safety as a female fan, but he's never taken football away.
Right.
He's never put it in a position where it's like, oh my God, are we going to get football?
Yeah,
I mean, it kind of was once, but I don't even know if that was Goodell
Which
at that
I
point.
guess makes the NHL kind of pretty bad, because
takes the sport
not
from
only can you not
you.
go to games without getting catcalled, not only are they trying to give you pink jerseys, but they also take hockey away from you.
Yeah.
So they've been really bad to you.
Yeah. Not as bad as the NFL in terms
No,
of,
not as
of
bad
the
as the
ladies
NFL.
stuff. I feel safer at hockey games than I would at a football game, but that could also be because I grew
Yeah.
up in a hockey rink. Like I was always there.
That was interesting to see the NFL's reaction to like for example, like the Ray Ray stuff. Like that stuff, they listened to that, and at least in the Slava Voinov situation, like shit canned him straight away. LA Kings not so much, but the NHL did. So yeah, I guess they deserve credit in that situation. I don't know if that'll stick though, because that was
We'll
during
see.
the cauldron of bubbling over hatred for Rice. And
It's never because it's the right thing to do. It's always because of the optics.
the optics. Yeah, no, that's true.
Optics are very important.
Yep.
All right, guys, more with Greg in a minute. But first, have you heard about performance-enhancing veggies that help improve circulation, energy, and stamina? Well, they exist. And at the top of the list are beets. They're loaded with dietary nitrates that boost nitric oxide levels in your body for more energy and stamina without the crash of fake energy drinks. But I usually don't eat beets because I think they taste gross. That's why I'm excited about Super Beets, the delicious circulation superfood that I drink every day. You'll feel the boost in energy and stamina in as little as 20 minutes guaranteed. Get a bonus 30-day supply free with your first order. Plus, get the book Beat the Odds. It's funny every time. Get that book free and also get free shipping. It's guaranteed or your money back. Call 800-951-9013. That's 800-951-9013. Or go to beetsbykatie.com. That's BEETS by Katie.com. All right, back to Greg. Okay, that John Scott story is an example of a journalist getting involved in the actual part of the story. That happened to you a different time in your career. You mentioned it before. This was last year, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, Peel got suspended for one game because you went out for drinks with him one night.
So, Tim Peel is a problematic official in the sense that we're not sure if he knows the rules of the game he officiates. Genuinely. He's one of these guys that when you see a call like goalie interference, you are wondering exactly what interpretation of the rule he's created in his mind and is sticking to, because it's not of this reality. It's some like Earth 2 interpretation.
Like Joey Crawford in the NBA.
Yeah. On top of that, sometimes he misses goals. On top of that, sometimes he misses penalties.
Joe West
we
in
did
the
a
MLB.
we did a bit on Puck Daddy called the I think it's like the Further Adventures of Tim Peel, terrible NHL referee, and it was a Photoshop of him kind of like with his arms raised flying through space. It was one of my favorite things we ever created on the blog. But like we hammered this guy, and I heard through some common friends that he wanted to talk to me about us being so hard on him.
Is that strange to you?
No, because I think in hockey, because it's such a small community, that there's a lot of that. Like you'll get calls from guys in the league that are just like, what did you mean by that? Or why are you saying that? Why are you writing that? And I think there's a sense of like, you can reach out to people. Now a referee, if that's what you're getting at, yeah. That's really weird.
Yeah.
But
Because people shouldn't even, it's like an old adage that you should never know a referee's name, because that means they're not doing their job.
Yeah,
They should blend in.
in the case of the NHL refs, like you can't talk to them after games.
Right.
So it is a little weird that a ref would reach out to me. You're right on that.
And that he's reading your blogs and that he's...
No, they all read the blogs.
Yeah? It's
Oh,
weird
God, yeah,
to
they all
me.
do. So he reached out through some common friends, and I figured that he wanted to talk at some point. Then one night, like I get this text message, and it's from a number I don't recognize, and it's Tim Peel. And someone had given him my number. He's in the city for a game the next night, and he's just like, "Hey, do you want to go out and have a drink and like talk about stuff?" I'm like, "That's a little strange." And my first thought was, this guy is going to bring linesmen with him and throw me in a dumpster and close the lid. And I said to my now fiance, I'm like, "So should I go?" And she's like, "You should go just to see if someone throws you in a dumpster and closes the lid."
Because that's a story.
Because that's a story, yeah. So I went, and we met at Foley's, my favorite hockey pub here in New York, and we had a number of beers and talked about stuff. He was a nice guy, a little strange, but that's all right.
You don't say.
I found
he texted you to grab drinks out of the blue.
I found out a lot about refereeing. For example, they have to wash their own uniforms.
Ooh.
So a lot of them actually stay at like an embassy suites where they have a washer dryer, and they like use it during the day to wash their stuff.
Wow.
Kind of crazy, right?
That's
and over time, like I had a better understanding of why he does the things he does, why crazy shit always seems to happen when he referees. Like for example, like he is an older ref. They pair him with a younger ref. The younger ref will make a bad call, and then he'll get blamed for it. Like, that's one of his explanations. And as the night went on, we kind of came to an understanding that maybe I was a little bit too hard on him, but at the same time, he's terrible. So I think that was the understanding.
You both came to that understanding.
Maybe that was my understanding. So at the end or near the end of the night, he's like, "Let's do a shot." I'm like,
I love this so
all right.
much.
So he ordered up. We're like, "What should we drink?" And he ordered up tequila shots, and it was the NHL does not believe this shit, but it was his idea to take a picture of it, and he asked me to put it on Twitter.
He did?
He did. Yes. So
Even I am like, don't take pictures of me when I do shots, and please don't put them on Twitter.
So we did a tequila shot together.
Yeah.
And knocked it back, and I put it on Twitter, and of course it blew up.
Became a huge part of the
It
story.
became a huge part of the story, and then I told him straight away. I'm like, I'm going to write about this, and he's like, please do. Like, clear the air. We did this so you can kind of be the herald for me and let people know that I'm not as bad as they think I am. I'm like, all right.
That worked.
So the next morning, story, I think at that point had gone up, and
Did you write it drunk from all these beers and shots, or did you do it?
No, but you know what's amazing is that my memory sucks. Like birthdays, car keys. Like I may have suffered a head injury at some point because for being a guy who should remember facts for his job.
Yeah.
I have a shitty memory.
Me too.
But I remembered every breath I took that night. So I came home and just was like tap 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 tap. Luckily, drinking and writing is not. It's part of the course.
Yeah.
So I just banged out the story and then published it the next morning. But like, he texted me the next morning and he's like, hey, I think I might be in a little bit of trouble. I'm like, why? Like, people love this. Like, the reaction to the story was very much positive. It was very much like, wow, this is really amazing. This guy tried to reach out and explain himself, because if more refs did it, then we'd understand him better and we wouldn't be so pissed off all the time.
It's a perspective we don't normally get as fans.
And he, he gave some tricks of the trade and stuff. Like, people were really like, wow, I thought this guy was, king douchebag, but lo and behold, he's a human being. But he got in trouble, and the NHL wasn't as upset as I thought they'd be that he talked to me. It was that he did the tequila shot, reason being that he was refereeing the next night in New Jersey. And their thought was...
It takes more than 24 hours to sleep off one tequila shot.
Right. I'm like, drink some coconut water. No, but he...
I do a tequila shot 6 hours before the show, and I'm sober as hell. I'm like, I need another!
So he texted me, and he's like, they're not going to let me ref tomorrow night. And I'm like,
man.
oh, man. So that was the thing, was they were worried that he'd make a bad call in the game and somebody would have like a sign that says, the ref's drunk, and then have a picture up there. So long story short, he became synonymous with this, unfortunately. And then he wasn't allowed to referee in the playoffs that season because of doing this. But I just found out today that he's back in the playoffs as part of their officiating crew this year.
That's good.
He's out of having done tequila shots with a blogger jail.
Good. So the jail lasted about a year.
Yeah, and I had some really interesting conversations with NHL people after that, where they were under the impression the whole thing was one thing and it was another thing. But yeah, that was another odd moment.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I too recently was part of a story in the hockey world, as recent as, well, this comes up Tuesday, so 2 days ago. I found out the power of hockey Twitter, which I must say is very powerful.
It is.
My mom, Tuukka Rask didn't play the last game for the Bruins.
I thought you were going to say your mom is Tuukka Rask, which would be an amazing hockey story.
So that is what I'm about to say.
What?
Tuukka Rask didn't play the last game for the Bruins. Bruins fans are mad about that. We lost. We are not in
He was sick.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so my mom's Facebook status yesterday, my mom was a bartender in Newton and other places, but she grew up in Newton and was a bartender in the Boston, Massachusetts, whatever circuit for a while, my whole life. Recently retired, and her Facebook status was, for those curious about the end of the Bruins season, Tuukka Rask was, I have it on good authority or a good source, that Tuukka Rask was at Buff's Pub in Newton Corner the night of the game that we lost, which was Friday night. Or Saturday night, I don't remember now, because I blacked out.
The one he didn't play in?
Yeah.
Yeah, Saturday.
He was at Buff's Pub at Newton Corner eating hot wings at the bar at 10 p.m. Doesn't sound like food for somebody with a bad stomach or something like that. And I was like, oh. So I took a screen grab of it and I sent it to a guy who works in sports talk radio in Boston, thinking like he'd be like, ha ha ha, your mom's funny. A couple people started retweeting it, and all of a sudden it was like, if this is true, I swear to God, like that's so fucked up. And then somebody else was like, this seems really like you don't have, like this seems like a problematic tweet. Did you double check your sources?
Oh,
and
now
I had
you're
to
a
send out a
reporter,
tweet that was like, hello, I was just sending out a screen grab of my mother's Facebook status. It even said in the original tweet that like this guy DJ Bean, I'm like, you should probably investigate, meaning like I'm not going to, saw this stupid thing from my mother, who knows? And people were like losing their shit. And then Sports Talk Radio in Boston today, on like the day, it's opening day today in Boston, and we're talking about, was Tuukka at this random bar
eating hot wings,
therefore not committed to the team.
The bees are falling apart and he's eating hot wings at 10 o'clock. Doesn't sound like a stomach virus to me.
That was an awful Boston accent, but I appreciate the effort.
Well, I mean, awful Boston accent. I mean, come on now.
Oxymoron. But so I can understand. I feel your pain a little on how much hockey. The hockey fans are very passionate, and they're always listening, which is cool and also awful.
Super reactionary, and yeah, and especially like, you know, I see people in the media. I mean, I take my hits, but like mainstream media folks or like traditional media folks, like there are guys that I'm surprised they haven't taken out restraining orders against their followers based on how much vitriol they get. But yeah, I could see that happening.
Passionate.
Especially when he gets blamed for the utter collapse of the Boston Bruins, when in fact it wasn't necessarily his fault that the Bruins couldn't.
So let's use this as a transition into our talk about the playoffs. What do you think, what happened with the Bruins? Fix them.
All right.
Please fix them.
The first fix is keep your coach, which they won't do.
They might
nah, they ain't
do.
gonna keep him.
Who's going to coach us? Mike Milbury?
Yeah.
Please say no.
I love that idea so much.
No.
I love that idea so much. I love the idea of somebody walking in that door and being like, you know what your problem is? You don't punch enough. And just being like, okay, that's your solution. And also, any Russians in here? Go. You gone. You gulag. Like, that would be great too. And then he calls everybody women. That'd be fantastic as well.
Progressive.
Yeah, very progressive. But I think the problem with the Bruins is one of construction and not coaching. And I think Claude Julien is a coach that dragged this team kicking and screaming to get within playoff position. They fell short. I don't think that's his fault. I think they lost a lot from their blue line over the last couple of years. You know, Boychuk and, you know, Hamilton and all these guys. Like, they clearly need to address their defense and make some changes in the personnel up front. But I think that firing the coach would be a thing, unless they see it as a longer rebuild. I don't think you fire Julien.
But so even just a rebuild, if they could just commit to like, let's get rid of some people, and then maybe we don't make the playoffs this year, but we can make them next year. But instead they were like, we'll keep enough guys because we want the revenue coming into the team having.
But the real issue is
playoffs.
It takes a level of humility for them to admit that maybe it's a longer term problem.
Yeah.
And you know, when Cam Neely, Boston's
Jesus,
yeah, when he's the guy at the top of the food chain, like it's not going to be the case. Like they're going to try to compete every year. You see it in Montreal, you know, this week too, where like that team was dog shit, and then like, but their you know prognosis is, well, our goalie was hurt. If the goalie's not hurt, then we're fine. And everybody's like, no, you're not fine. Your team's dog shit, and everybody hates each other apparently. So. It takes a bottoming out, or it takes someone with some long-term vision to realize what the problems are. But in the Bruins' case, like, are they long-term? Like, can you find a couple of defensemen and fix what the problem is up front? You probably can. And they'll fire the coach, and it'll be a mistake, and he'll go someplace and win. And then everybody in Boston will be like, you know, if we had Claude back.
Wow, you really love us, don't you?
It's not that I hate Boston per se. It's that the amount of hatred I have for the Patriots colors my feeling about everything else.
God, we're going to move on now. I'm going to let you talk about football and embarrass yourself. Playoffs start tomorrow because tomorrow is Wednesday.
That's right. Rivalry night.
Yep. Been a few years since the new playoff format. So how are you feeling about the playoff bracket?
Well, I like the idea that the NHL is trying to develop a bracket because, as you know, it's impossible to gamble on hockey. Like every time you look at a hockey line, it's like this one's giving away minus 300 and this one's giving away plus 2. And then there's like, I think one of the lines in Vegas was just an emoji at one point this week. And I didn't understand that.
Was it the poop emoji?
It was the poop emoji and then like a hammer. I don't know what the meant, but like so. It's impossible to bet on hockey. They're trying to create a way for people to like do office pools and stuff, and I appreciate that. Like that's cool. That said,
making it digestible for the casual fan.
That's right, easily digestible, despite the fact that when you open up the paper or go online and look at the standings, it looks like a trigonometry problem.
Yeah,
It's just insane. So like, I respect that, but at the same time, I really felt it was a if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of deal. The 1-8 playoff format produced pretty good matchups. It mostly produced a champion we could all feel okay with. And in this format, you're going to lose, maybe the Kings, maybe the Blackhawks before you're supposed to. There was
like
a chance
Blues
those two
Blackhawks in the first round.
There was a chance that the Kings and Blackhawks could have played in the first round if the Blackhawks had jumped down to the wild card. And it was like, why would you ever want that in the playoff format?
It's true.
But it's fine. It's the playoffs. It's still great.
Every sport has like a playoff that like isn't perfect. No one's really found the exact right way to do it and to seed it. So
where they'll mess it up is if they go to play-in games and expand the seeding. Like the idea that it's 16 teams right now makes it perfect and tidy and nice. But at some point, just like at some point they're going to expand, and there's debates on whether or not they should. I think a Vegas team's great. That's fine.
You do think that's great?
Oh God, yeah.
For the gambling angle, or
no, for the revenue angle, I think they'll kill it. Like the fact that they had like 13,000 season ticket commitments from people that aren't casinos tells me there's a fan base there, and the fact that the NHL will be first in that market is huge.
That is huge.
Could you
that is huge. Underrated huge.
There was back in the 90s there was talk that the NHL wanted to expand to Oklahoma City. Can you imagine if a hockey team got there before the Sonics moved? Like what kind of gold mine that would have been? It would have been huge.
Yeah.
So Vegas is the same deal. Like they need to get there first. I think that team will succeed.
What about Quebec?
No, Quebec's
Give them back the Nordiques.
Well, but the problem is that the Las Vegas has the American currency and the Canadian currency right now is not up to snuff.
That's
but
true.
If they ever expand,
beautiful city though.
It's very beautiful. If they ever expand, je suis Quebec City. If they ever expand the playoff format, I'll have to really digest that because I kind of like the fact that we have 16 teams. That's it.
It's clean.
Yeah, very.
It's very clean. All right, so let's break down a couple of these.
Hardcore sports.
We're going to talk about sport. I was talking about this earlier that I'm on your hockey podcast. I don't think we talked hockey at all, and you're going to be on my not at all sports podcast, and we're going to fucking talk hockey.
We talked about like the Kardashians, Batman. We explained why Batman wanted to V Superman.
Yep. Yes, we did. Batman v Superman :
Dawn of Justice.
Dawn of Justice.
Yeah.
All right. So the Capitals. Everyone's like, this could finally be the year they get past the second round.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I don't know if they'll get past the second round, but they'll get past the first.
You pick the Flyers.
This is they get the Flyers. I pick the Caps in 7.
I like that. Yeah, because everyone's like, oh, they're going to sweep.
Oh, I don't think
No
so.
way.
Unless the Flyers are completely spent from getting into the playoffs, which is a possibility.
They've been playing like playoff caliber games for the last.
Yeah, and their goalie Steve Mason started like 10 or 11 games straight. There's a fatigue factor involved. I think the Caps will flip the switch to care about hockey again because they haven't had to care about it for 2 months basically.
Because they won by such a huge margin.
They clinched everything. The real X factor here, there's 2 of them. One is the death of Ed Snyder, the Flyers owner who died this week. I think he was 83. They all knew he was sick. They were all kind of pushing towards the playoffs and dropping hints about doing it for Ed and that kind of thing. But now he's gone. Now they're going to be wearing the patch. I remember the Rangers that one year where Marty St. Louis lost his mother in the playoffs.
Yep.
And what kind of dynamic that was. Like the Flyers love this guy.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if that comes into play. The other factor is that the Capitals have to prove to us that they've made the changes they need to make to not be the Capitals anymore. And that's why I'm picking them in 7, because I love the idea of this going 7 games and everybody freaking out in Washington, and then Justin Williams, Mr. Game 7 that they got from the LA Kings, does something special in a Game 7. You're like, that's what we were missing this whole time, was a guy who actually shows up in a Game 7. So I'm picking the Caps in 7, and the Flyers will give them a real good series, I think.
Okay. Of course, because it's the playoffs, Penguins Rangers. You still interested in that matchup?
No.
I feel like all the time.
No, the only one that would have been worse is Caps Rangers. That's the only other one we see. I picked the Caps. I'm sorry, I picked the Penguins in 5.
Okay.
I think the Rangers are that old ass team that doesn't know the window's closed, and it's closed.
Oh.
And I think that Lundqvist might be injured, and I think he's not been the same goalie that he's been.
Always so good in the playoffs, though.
Yeah, and that's what gave me pause. I was trying to find a reason to pick the Rangers because I've got a lot of chalk picks in these playoffs, but I can't in good faith. Penguins are, like, the Rangers' entire offense is counterpunching, and the Penguins never give up the puck. So that's kind of hard then for the offense for the Rangers. So I'm picking the Penguins in 5.
Okay.
Quick series for them. My only concern is they're super fast now, and Shrek, Yevgeny Malkin has to come back, and he's not super fast. So how does that affect the offense?
Is Fleury back?
He should play. Yeah, one of their other goalies, like this young prospect, Matt Murray, might be hurt, but
yeah, because he got hurt in the Flyers game the other night.
Yeah, but Fleury should be back for the series.
All right. What else in the East? What else? Red Wings made the playoffs for the 25th straight season. You're welcome.
I was super happy about that because I didn't like the idea of their former coach Mike Babcock's ego getting any bigger about having gone to Toronto and gotten all the monies, and then he's like, they couldn't make the playoffs without me because I'm super great.
Yeah,
they'd be the worst. So I'm really happy that they made the playoffs and kept the streak alive. The big news for them, obviously, is Pavel Datsyuk, their superstar player, is going to leave for Russia after the season.
Make you think of Kovalchuk at all? You having a little flashback?
No, Kovalchuk left in his prime. Like, Datsyuk is late 30s. He's going to be with his daughter, and people gave him shit for that for some reason. But I got no problem with it. But last hurrah for him. Tampa Bay is missing Stamkos and Strawman and maybe Tyler Johnson, and everybody's hurt. And their goalie, Ben Bishop, could steal a series, but I'm going to pick the Red Wings in 6. I think the Red Wings played like shit down the stretch.
I think the Red Wings in 6 too.
Oh, did you really?
Yeah.
I think they played like shit down the stretch because of the weight of having to continue the streak. And I think now that they're in, you're going to see more of a loosey-goosey team.
Okay. Panthers are in the playoffs for the 5th time ever, playing the Islanders in the first round.
Yeah.
Will Yager ever retire, or is he just going to play until he collapses and dies?
Well, at some point, Katie Nolan, the sun will explode, and there won't be any life or hockey. And that's when he'll stop playing.
Makes the most sense.
The interesting thing about this series was one of the Panthers co-owners actually said on the record that he wanted to play the Islanders instead of the Rangers because he thought that the Rangers were better and Lundqvist was better. So he kind of gets his wish here, which makes me a little nervous about the Islanders being just...
Fuck you.
Exactly.
Because they've embraced the underdog thing completely.
Yeah. That said, I think the Panthers are a better hockey team, and I like Luongo in this series. I only want the best things for him. And I think they'll win the series in 6. 6 games over the Islanders.
This was a tough one. I haven't made my pick on
and
that
everybody's an Islander fan will be like... Oh, we'll go out in the first round and we can't see the hockey games because our seats are obstructed.
Because Barclays is garbage.
Barclays is ass. Go back to Nassau. Asbestos.
Which was also garbage.
Yeah.
On to the West. Another untraditional hockey market. Dallas having quite a season. Really doing well, but they've got that interesting situation with 2 goalies in net all season. How do you think that's going to keep going throughout the postseason?
Let's pause on that for a second. The echoing screams you hear are the orgasms by NBC executives over the fact that there are no Canadian teams in the playoffs.
I know.
It's straight up American teams. None of this. Oh, we've got New York in the playoffs, but they're playing Ottawa. Yeah, exactly. None of that shit this year. It's just American teams. Dallas is great. They're super fun. They're the team that everybody's kind of rooting for because they play a style of sort of offensive hockey, up and down hockey, that if it succeeds, other teams might try to play it too, and then everything will get really exciting. So they're fun to watch. Minnesota backed into the playoffs like nobody's business.
Yeah,
and
really.
Everybody's hurt on the team. This is a short
sweep.
Could be a sweep. I'm gonna say 5, but it could be a sweep.
5. I said 5 too.
Wow. Don't celebrate, lady.
Do you think
I took a
know.
pie to the face once because I got a series pick wrong. So you should not be very happy about this.
I feel like there's a lot of teams going into the playoffs with weird goalie situations right now.
Yeah, a lot of platoons, a lot of not one guy getting all the starts.
Do you think that's a good strategy?
I think
I'm not used to it.
It's happened for a couple of years now, mainly because there's a finite number of elite goalies in the league, and those guys are locked up and paid for, so everybody else has to kind of make do.
Yeah.
And
It's like running backs.
Yeah. Some
the
teams
NFL.
have Adrian Peterson, and some teams do it by committee.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly right. You see, we need you to translate hockey for all
Into
the people that don't watch it, to let them know they're on a power play. That's like taking a player off the basketball court for 2 minutes.
Yeah, that's exact. Let me do it. You don't do it anymore. St. Louis, Chicago could be like one of the best series of the whole.
Yeah.
That's going to be a good one.
Everybody thinks this is the chance for the Blues to beat the Blackhawks, to turn the tables on their tormentor. I am not one of those people.
No.
I think St. Louis is the team that'll be deer in the headlights when the Blackhawks push this thing into like a 7th game. I'm not betting against Jonathan Taves in a playoff series this early, and also St. Louis doesn't score enough goals for me. So I'm gonna pick the Blackhawks in 7, and that means the Blues will probably fire their coach after the season.
Yeah, probably. And then we've got 3 California teams.
Woo!
And Nashville.
Yeah, that's a lot of celebrity fans that just discovered there's playoff hockey coming to those games. Very exciting.
Anaheim, Nashville. Who wins there?
Anaheim, I think I said 6, mainly because they were my cup pick before
The
this season.
same
I know, it's
bracket,
kind of scary.
which does not bode well for you.
or you. They were my cup pick before the season. They've really straightened their shit out. They were one of the worst teams in hockey for the first half of the season. Bruce Boudreau, their coach.
Boudreau.
Yeah, he turned the team defensive. He got to play a little defense. They've got good goaltending. They've got good offensive balance, and I think I'm not sold on. This is one of those deals where like I'm picking one team to win the cup, but I'm also saying that Nashville could easily win the series too, because I think they're a good hockey team, very stout defense, and if their goaltending has figured itself out with Pekka Rinne, then they could be real dangerous. But I'll pick the Ducks here.
All right, and then lastly we've got the Kings Sharks.
Yeah, this is the series where everybody's being really cute and being like, you know what? It's crazy, but San Jose could win.
No, they can't.
No, they can't.
They can't.
Do you pick that? Do you pick the Kings too? Huh?
I picked the Kings in 6.
I picked the Kings in 6 as well, and I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. One, because I picked the Sharks to beat the Kings one year, and then they gave up a 3-0 lead. The Kings won the series, and then I took 4 pies to the face at center ice during a Kings game from their announcers and from handsome actor Will Wheaton.
Ooh.
That was the thing that happened.
Ooh.
So I'm bitter about that, but I'm also like, just like I can't bet against Jonathan Taves in a playoff series. The idea that people are betting against Jonathan Quick, who's without question like one of the best postseason goalies of my lifetime, in a series where he's not only playing a team he hates, but playing his understudy, Martin Jones, who left to go to greener pastures and get his crack at being a starter. It's just not going to happen.
No way.
He's gonna win it himself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
We have all the same picks, and now we both are like side-eyeing each other and
Maybe
be like,
we should, and
who's
then we're
the
both
dumbass here?
gonna go change them, and we change them to again the exact same picks. To save time, just who do you have winning the cup? Who do you have in the final, and who wins?
Well, before the season, I had the Ducks and Montreal, but Montreal, as you know, lost their goalie, which is the whole reason they didn't win.
It's the only thing wrong
the only
with
thing
Montreal.
wrong with the team. It's not like they all hate each other. There was a great thing today, if you could find it, where PK Subban, to prove that there is no strife in the locker room, went over to give his captain Max Pacioretty a hug, and he gave him a big old bear hug, and Pacioretty was like it was like hugging a steel beam. And if I was in Montreal, I'd be like, why didn't you hug him back? And make that the controversy. Huggate.
Huggate. 16.
I picked the Ducks, and if I'm going to take somebody out of the East, since my team didn't make the playoffs that I picked earlier this season,
you picked the Devils to make the playoffs?
No, I didn't. No, not my team. I mean like the Montreal team. I wasn't stupid.
What?
I think the Caps are losing the Penguins in the semifinals. So if that's the case,
Oh God.
Yeah, Pittsburgh. Let's go Ducks in Pittsburgh.
Oh, it's a very full of beaks. It's a final that's full of beaks.
They're 2 birds that love water, but only one can fly, Katie Nolan, and that's why the Ducks will win the cup.
Ducks are winning the cup.
Over the flightless foul.
Hold it. You heard it. Hold it here first.
Hold it here first.
All right. We got to close this with the thing we close with all the time. You have to go fast because you have to go do a thing that isn't this.
I do.
It's called the Garbage 10. I'm going to ask you 10 rapid fire questions.
Go.
You ready? What was your first AOL screen name?
It was, I think it was NJD Jester, which was my, I ran a column called The Jester's Court, and NJD's for Devils.
Oh, lovely. Ranch or blue cheese?
Blue cheese.
What's the first concert you ever went to?
My dad took me to see the Monkees and Gary Puckett in the Union Gap at the Brennanburn Arena.
Oh my God.
And he went on the wrong day, and we had to come back a week later. And my dad got out at the swamp near the arena. He's like, I don't know, it looks kind of quiet. I'm like, yeah, no shit.
Well, it's a Monkees concert,
Yeah,
so
no
there's not many people here.
Like, no shit, old man.
Who's your favorite superhero? You could probably go on
Batman.
this forever. Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, come on. Was there another answer?
Even when he's V-Superman.
Is he V'd Superman all over the place?
Do you put ketchup on top of your fries or on the side?
I put them on the side. On top of fries is just stupid because you can't get the lower layer of fries.
True. What's your guilty pleasure television show?
Oh.
Like you feel real bad admitting.
I don't believe in guilty pleasure television. I think you like what you like.
What's the most piece of garbage television show that you watch?
It'd probably be something on like food. Oh, you know what? You know what's terrible? Tiffany Amber Thiessen's cooking show on the Cooking Network, Cooking with Tiffany, where she has grade G level celebrities like Matthew Lillard from Scream come over and make like pie.
He should make liver. From Scream when he says liver alone. Do you get? I had a crush on him.
Yeah, it was really creepy when they're making pie and all of a sudden Skeet Ulrich shows up and like they're like she's like, what's going on here? He's like, would you like to know, Tiffany?
I don't believe in guilty pleasure TV, but I watch Tiffany Amber Thiessen's
When it's on.
cooking show. Do you floss before you brush your teeth or after?
I never floss.
Is a hot dog a sandwich?
Yes.
Why?
Because it is, if you turn it sideways, it's a sandwich, right? So why wouldn't it be a sandwich straight up?
What was the last movie you went to see in the theater?
Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice.
You're about to be put to death. What's your final meal? Give me an entree, a dessert, and a beverage.
The old answer, and this will still be the answer because maybe it would delay my execution, would be 25 chili and cheese burritos from Taco Bell, which is a menu item they no longer have. Yeah, it could get messy. Beverage.
Wouldn't matter. You're about to die.
Yeah,
so.
beverage. Really old scotch with one of them big old ball ice cubes in the glass. I like those a lot. And then dessert. I'm an appetizer guy, so like I'm not. This is a classic fight with me and my fiance because she's all dessert, so I have to give up appetizers to have dessert.
Aw,
yeah, I know.
compromise.
I try. I would say. I'll tell you what my favorite dessert is. Chocolate 7 layer cake's the answer, but the thing that would be like my last meal kind of thing would be butter crunch ice cream from Friendly's.
Ooh.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of that.
Ooh, see, Katie Nolan loves maple walnut from Friendly's. You can't really find that anywhere else.
Friendly's was the joint, man. When you were a kid in Matawan, New Jersey, where are you going to go? You can go party somewhere in New York? No, you're going to go to the Friendly's on Route 34.
Did you get a Jubilee roll around the holidays?
Oh, God, man. Putting together.
So good.
Oh, my God. You could put a little ice cream cone on top of my sundae to make it look like a party hat?
Oh, my God.
Yeah, it was so exciting.
Greg Wyshynski, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Katie Nolan.
And thanks for having the same bracket as me.
Oof.
And everyone be sure to listen to, what is it, Puck Soup?
Merrick versus Wyshynski on
not
iTunes.
on that one.
Puck Soup on Nerdist.
That one.
And read Puck Daddy on Yahoo. Oh, get my book. Take your eye off the puck is the book. If you don't know anything about hockey, read the book and you'll learn a thing or two.
If you don't know anything about books, watch hockey. Should be the slogan.
On NBC, Rivalry Night. Your night for illiteracy.
Watch hockey, everybody. It's great. That's my pitch.
Thanks.
Big thanks again to Greg for being here. Really cool of him to come. Also be sure to listen to his podcast, which I'm on, because it was really cool of me to go there. We'll be back with another podcast on Thursday, as usual. Make sure to subscribe on iTunes and rate this podcast and leave a comment. But you know what I always say, 5 stars, nice comment. Or listen to us on Art19, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play, or a microwave. I think you can now listen to this podcast exclusively on a microwave. Thank you guys for listening. Bye. Love you. Mean it.